Mike at westendmotorsports.com here with another podcast episode for you. This time we are going to cover a question. Last week we did an interview, and so this week we're going to cover one of the most sort of common questions that we deal with on a daily and sometimes multiple times a day basis, which is to tune or not to tune. And when you do tune, what do you tune with? Which is a bit of a tongue twister, but it's a question that a lot of people have over a long period of time, and we've been giving the same answer for a very long time, and I feel that it's pretty accurate for most applications. And so we just wanted to kind of broadcast it out there, and it's a really common question for a lot of people that are new to the industry here, and new to maybe if you're not new to riding and stuff, but you're new to customizing your bike and things like that, new to the Harley scene, etc. And you're getting told probably 5 different things by 5 different people, or more than 5 different people. You know, you go on the forum, it says one thing. You go on Facebook, it says another thing. You talk to your buddy, which we've talked about in a previous video, is always a good way to start to make a mistake. And they say one thing, you know, and then you go to the dealer and they say another thing, and then you talk to a guy like me and we say something else. And so there's a lot of noise out there, and the purpose of this video is to hopefully help you know for yourself how to get down that path and how to spend the least amount of money and not cost yourself money in the long run, okay? And so the first question is, you know, do I need to tune? Now, obviously, what we're talking about here is if you're modifying your bike, let's say your bike's performance in some way. Most of the time, this is a question that comes with exhaust, right? So the whole framework of this conversation is really going to be around the Harley touring models, you know, your street glides, baggers, et cetera, et cetera. But this is broadly applicable across the board to any combustion motor. It doesn't matter if it's a Harley, Honda, Indian, BMW even, or whatever. Okay, so if you've got a combustion motor and it's fuel injected, then this will generally apply to you, although most of the framework is going to be about Harley touring models because that's the majority of what we deal with here. And so, you know, there's a lot of talk about tuning again, like I said before, and the thing that you want to know is really, at the end of the day, I think you want your bike to sound better, perform better, and what you really want to do is you want to know how much this whole process is going to cost you. Okay, so you're at the beginning stages of it, and you're trying to map out everything that you're doing and get an idea in your head. Okay, well, I want to buy mufflers. The mufflers that I want are $700. Well, do I have to spend another $1,000 getting the bike tuned afterwards? Do I have to do all these other things that go along with it? And so that's kind of what we want to address. So to begin addressing it, what is tuning? Let's do a real quick broad overview of that. And what you're doing with a tuner, whether it's aftermarket or whether it's a factory Harley, not a factory Harley tuner, but a Harley aftermarket tuner like their Screaming Eagle products, is you're changing the amount of fuel that is going into the system, broadly speaking. Okay, so when you add performance modifications, a lot of times you're changing the environment inside the cylinder, essentially. So you're adding more air. Every combustion motor runs ideally on a set ratio of fuel to air, okay? And so for those of you guys out there that know all this, just ignore it, okay? This is not for you. This is really for the beginner. And so that's what you're doing, right? So now if you add air, ideally, you should be adding fuel too. Now there are times where the air is not added across the board throughout the RPM range. So you might need to add fuel in this set of RPM, you know, in this range of RPM, say 2100 to 2400 or whatever it might be, but it's not necessarily just this even thing, okay? And so depending on the type of exhaust you're doing, it could be really varied, and the exhausts that don't perform particularly well tend to vary that even more, and that's why they could be really hard to tune to. Good working functional performance exhausts should require the least amount of work on the tuning side as far as inconsistencies go. It doesn't mean that there's not going to need changes to be made or even across the board, but the inconsistency should be really taken out of there. And so that's what you're doing with a tuner. And the reason that you're buying a tuner is because basically it's a little computer that tells your current computer to override what it knows now and what it's doing now, and to put in these new settings. Okay, so that's why we're tuning in general. Um, and so the question is, when do you have to do that? And so, I'm going to tell you that my definition of need might be different than some other people's out there, because that's what we're asking. When do we need to tune? And I will tell you that you don't need to tune, because you don't need a motorcycle and you don't need to put exhaust on the motorcycle that you don't need, right? So there's actually very little need involved here. But as far as the bike is concerned, when do you need to tune for the bike to run correctly? In most cases, especially on your late model touring bikes, if you're just changing slip-ons, you do not need to tune. Most of the late model touring bikes have a catalytic converter in the head pipe. So when we change slip-ons, we're not really changing a whole lot of air, especially into the combustion chamber, okay? We're changing sound, but we're changing the sound sort of downstream, if that makes any sense. If you think of the catalytic converter like a little dam, and your exhaust is, like a river and it's dammed up, no matter what you do to the stream, whether it's widening it or narrowing it, within reason, post the dam, it's not going to make that much of effect if the dam is still in place, okay? Opening up the dam or not is going to affect all of that later on down the road. So that's how you have to think of your slip-ons or your mufflers. It is, the amount of flow that you're getting after the dammed up part, which is at the catalytic converter, okay? And we can get into the weeds about catalytic converters flowing more, et cetera, but that's not the point of this conversation, okay? And so most times you're doing slip-ons, you do not need to tune. Now, where that changes is on some of the softail models, or most of the softail models, the catalytic converter is actually in the muffler. And so even though you're just changing slip-ons, you could be making a pretty serious change there. And so that gets a little bit iffy. It's more of a 50-50 type of a thing in my experience. Often you don't need to, but it may depend on the exact muffler that you're replacing the stock muffler with, okay? So that's where you got to tread a little bit more lightly in that type of situation. So regardless of your bike, if you're not removing the cat and all you're doing is changing mufflers, well, then you're probably okay as far as tuning go. So then when do you have to tune? Well, we have what they call, and Harley has their stage system. So you've got stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4 as far as performance modifications go. Stage 1 is, now some people will tell you it's mufflers and an intake and then a tuner. We don't factor that in because of that catalyst not being changed. So we consider stage 1, and most people consider stage 1 to be a complete exhaust system. So that would be aftermarket head pipes, mufflers, and intake. And in that time, you want to tune, okay? Because now you've completely changed the circulation, essentially, of your system, right? You've got more air going into the bike, and you've got more flow going out. You may have changed the back pressure, which is actually the air that's allowed back into the cylinder through the exhaust. And so at that point, it is recommended that you tune. Are there situations where people change a full exhaust system on certain bikes and don't have to tune? Yes. In my experience, it's mostly on the older bikes that would be pre-catalyst type of stock exhaust. So you're changing from a stock exhaust that was sort of baffled heavily, had a muffler that made the system quiet but didn't have a catalyst. And so that's not extreme of a change as going from a system that has a cat in it to a system that doesn't, and then we're adding there, okay? So your stage 1 system, our recommendation would be to tune for it. Now this is where we'll come back to this, but this is where we really get into the weeds as far as what tuner to tune with, etc. Okay, so stage 1, it's recommended. Stage 2 or above, which would be cams or any other internal performance modifications that fall outside of or above the stage 1 stuff that we just talked about, absolutely you should be tuning, and you should be tuning in a way that is the most dialed in way you could possibly get, okay? So a lot of our broad tunes, I would not recommend personally. People do it, they get away with it, their bike might run okay, but if you're doing those type of performance modifications, that's not just to increase the sound of the bike and or to change appearance, right? If you're doing a cam or other internal components, you're concerned with performance. And so in my estimation, A bad tune in this case, getting a tuner that's not the most accurate is going to cost you money and sort of undoes the money that you're spending on those performance modifications. Okay. And so this is where the devil's really in the details. And so if you call us and you say, hey, I want to know if I need a tuner, I want exhaust, the first follow-up question from us is going to be, are you going to do anything to that bike besides exhaust? Okay. Are you going to do anything greater than stage one down the road? And a lot of guys say, maybe, I'm not sure. Okay. And a handful of guys say, no, I'm never doing anything besides stage one. The bike's got plenty of power. I just want to leave it the way that it is. I'm just trying to get more sound, and a little bit more power would be great. Okay. For those guys, there's a whole host of tuners that are available to you that will work fantastic. Okay. I'm not going to name specific names. We could tell you, but basically the tuners that are the easiest for you to use at home. So the most user-friendly tuners, I'm talking about the Fuel Pack 4, some of the DynoJet products are really good for stage one. And if that's all you're going to do, they're generally less expensive. They don't require you to go to a dyno tuner. You can handle these things and tune the bike yourself, usually on your smartphone or tablet or whatever. And so that's an awesome option as far as that goes. Okay. It is not an awesome option if you're thinking about doing a cam down the road, okay? Because those things are limited. So because of their sort of mass appeal and their ability to be used by anybody, there's limitations technically on them. And so they're just not as much of a precision tool as some of the more advanced ones. And it makes sense. This is just like anything else. This is like a do-it-yourself project at home that you can handle without having any kind of construction background versus building a house. There's going to be parts of the process where you need to involve a professional. And so in my experience, that's where we get to when we get to stage 2 or above, which raises the next question, which is, okay, well, yeah, I do want to do a cam down the road, but I might not do it for a year or two. Okay. I'm only going to run to stage 1. What do I do now? Well, we're instantly going to wipe off a handful of tuners. Okay. The Power Vision 4 is off. The Fuel Pack 4 is off. DynoJet's Power Vision 2 is a unit that you can tune yourself. And then later on, you could take it to almost any dyno guy in the country and get a custom map. Now, you can call them and get a custom map that they've come up with. I'm not always the biggest fan of that type of thing. That's something that we're going to, when we talk to our good buddy Dave over at JD's coming up here in the future, we're going to address the specifics as to why, but this is just a broad view thing. But the Power Vision 2 is a really good stage 1 and then into stage 2 option. You can get a really quality tune right now at stage 1, and then you can also, basically you're wide open as far as your possibilities going into the future. So you're not cutting yourself off at all, and you're not forcing yourself to buy another tuner, spend another $500 or whatever it might be, 500 or more, when and if you decide to do a cam. That's an option. Thunder Max tuner is a more expensive option, but that's also an option. TTS is an option, not as user friendly to use for the average bear in my experience, but that's where we get into our next thing. So now if you're going to do stage 1 or let's say you're going to do stage 2 or you're going right into stage 2, what basket of tuners should you consider then? And this is where my recommendation always involves a little bit more work on your part. And I would tell you that based on all the dyno stuff that we've done, I don't believe that once you do stage 2, you're getting the best tune you can get with a preset or canned map from any of the suppliers. I don't care who it is, and they will differ with me, I'm sure, but I've seen those preset maps on dynos, and even if they're really close, I think that you're leaving some money on the table. And my experience is if you're spending the money on making the bike perform, you should go the whole way and do the job the right way the first time and get yourself a good tune. Now, how do you do that? Well, you got to have a qualified dyno guy in the area. And if you don't, we're going to talk about that. That's kind of the cleanup, catch-all kind of a thing, which we'll get to later. But the first step would be to contact, this is where you might want to lean on some friends. This is where you might want to lean on some people in the industry. Is there a qualified independent shop in the area where the guy is a really good dyno tuner? A good parts changer does not make a good dyno guy, okay? Being a good dyno guy is a specialty in and of itself. There are not that many good dyno guys. There are quite a few dyno guys. There are not that many good ones, okay? We were blessed to have been basically neighbors with one of the foremost dyno guys when we were back in PA, and so we got really lucky. People come from all over the country to go to him, and there are a good handful of those guys out there. It's not like he's the only one. I'm not suggesting that, but they can be pretty hard to find, and you may not have one in your state. You may not have one within a 10-hour drive of you. I don't know, but that's kind of the investigative work that you've got to do before you start on this process if you want to do it the right way. Now, you can hand it and do it differently, and you can use a canned map if that's the best you have. But if you can find yourself a good dyno guy, that's the option that we would recommend. And then you're going to say, well, what tuner do you recommend? Well, the thing is, you want to give that guy the tuner that he wants to use, okay, or that he's familiar with. That tuner is a tool, and that's it. That's what the product is. The tuner doesn't have, people talk about these things like they're special, like this tuner is going to give you more power, or that one's going to, and that's all complete nonsense. All these things are tools to get the bike to run correctly, okay? And each tool has sort of different functionalities and different features, but at the end of the day, you want that dyno guy that you've chosen, that you've narrowed down your search and you figured out this guy's the best dyno guy. You want that guy to be able to work with the tool that you're giving him, okay? And sometimes they're going to sell you the tuner, and sometimes you go in there. But the thing not to do is to go into a dyno guy with a box full of parts and say, well, Mike at West End says this is good. These guys over at his competitor said this is good. And I did all this searching on the internet, and everybody says that this particular part is the best. That is 100% the wrong way to go about doing this thing. You want to make sure that everything works together. And so when it comes to dyno tuning, talk to your dyno guy and say, hey man, what do you like to use? You don't call a plumber to come and fix your pipes and then say, hey bud, listen, I know you want to use the tools that are in your toolbox, but I read on the internet that you need to use this tool to fix my pipes. Now, you want the guy to fix the leak, and you want the guy to be able to do his job, right? And so that's why you hired him to come in the first place, and dyno guys are no different. Now, we sell basically every tuner on the market, so I'm in a position where I don't care what tuner your dyno guy uses. Many of them prefer one over the other, but at the end of the day, if that guy likes that software better, or he likes that tuner, or he feels like he's more capable of getting a better tune with a particular tuner, that's the one we want you to buy, okay? And that's the one that you should want to install on the bike. So that's how you pick your tuner if you're doing this stage 2 stuff. Last question. What if I don't have a dyno guy anywhere near me? Well, in my experience, there's one good option, and that is the ThunderMax tuner, which is a complete ECM. Now, what that is going to do is that's going to use wideband oxygen sensors that connect directly to the tuner, and is going to use preset maps, okay? So you're basically going to download their map system and get the closest thing to what you got, and then the tuner is going to tune the rest of the way. Now, that's the most expensive out of the box option, but by the time you factor in dyno time, et cetera, it's not really, it may not be the most expensive, or it might be on par with all of the other tuners, okay? So you're talking about the cost of the tuner plus the cost of dyno time versus with the ThunderMax, really just the cost of the tuner. Now, you can get ThunderMax's custom dyno tune later on down the road as well. A lot of dyno guys don't necessarily like to do that because they're sort of fighting the machine a little bit. At least that's what I've been told. But just the same, if there is no dyno guy near you that you can't get to reasonably, that's an option. Now, just so you don't think that we've got a dog in the fight, on my bike is a TTS tuner. Why? Because that was the tuner that my dyno guy said that he liked to use the best, and it was his favorite tool. So that's what's on there. Period. End of story. We went from a tuner where I got a preset map prior to that he was interested in playing around with, and bike felt like it ran great, right? Because I had a cam installed, and then I got a custom map from them to do that. And, adding a cam is going to add a lot of horsepower and performance over stock, so it felt tremendous. Well, when I brought it to him and he switched to the TTS tuner and did his own custom tune on the bike, we instantly gained like 10 or 12 foot-pounds and 10 or 12 horsepower. No parts changed, nothing at all. That's the value of a quality dyno tune over a preset map. And so that's why, that's one of the reasons why our recommendation is to go that route if you're doing stage one, if you're doing anything greater than stage one. So just to sum everything up, stage one, let's go all the way back here. Just to sum everything up, if you're doing just slip-ons, you generally don't need to tune, depending on the bike, depending on the muffler. If you're doing stage one, we recommend that you tune, okay? And what tuner you use, you're pretty wide open. You can use the most basic tuners if you're not going to do anything else down the road. If you are, that opens you up into a whole other group of tuners, or actually narrows you down to a certain set of tuners, which would be like the TTS, the Power Vision 2, the Thunder Max, and there are others that I'm probably forgetting. And then once you cross that bridge, we strongly recommend getting a custom dyno tuner. And if you can't find a quality custom dyno tuner, then at that point, your best option left over is probably the Thunder Max. Okay, so that's just a quick overview, guys. We're just trying to boil this stuff down for you and make it as simple as possible. And it's probably going to bring up other questions. That's okay. You can reach out and ask us. There's always going to be situations that are not, cookie cutter type situations. And so, at that point, you should always reach out to either us or, whoever you're working with or whatever it might be, if you've got something that's not really like a boilerplate type of situation. So I appreciate you watching, guys. Thanks for staying tuned. We've got some more interviews coming down the line. I just lined up a couple guys that I'm pretty excited about. And so we're going to keep this thing going, and we hope that you can provide some feedback. And as always, feel free to reach out with any questions. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.